So, I basically, I'm a very like strong Misesian and like Austrian extremist, especially when it comes to finance and little things like maturity, transformation, and what the hell is banking. This all is like extreme greatness. There's a wonderful book, however, um, by oh god, what's his name? The mid Friedrich List, called "The National System of Political Economy," and List reinvented, or essentially, people describe him as a mercantilist, but mercantilism had long been eclipsed by the work of Adam Smith. He was really a neo mercantilist, and he invented the industrial policy that basically built sort of the strength of Germany in the second half of the 19th century, when Germany was essentially the China of his age. Unfortunately, this happened like after, he died penniless, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you read List's work, it's very witty, it's wonderful, it's excellent reading. And one of the things that he does is he does the same Newtonian Einsteinian thing. He's like, Adam Smith is right about everything as long as you're using Adam Smith's assumptions. And as soon as you violate Adam Smith's assumptions, Adam Smith becomes wrong. But, essentially, it's like in normal space, Adam Smith is right. But in like, if you assume like Riemann geometry, Adam Smith is wrong. However, we actually happen to live in Riemann geometry. And if you essentially start with the assumption that there's no such thing as a country, or that then sort of in a certain sense, which, I could go deeper into, but I don't know if we want to go down this rat hole, then Adam Smith is completely right. But if you model a country as a firm which owns its people, then suddenly Adam Smith becomes wrong, in the sense that, again, it's like Newtonian, and outside of that Newtonian regime, Adam Smith can be very, very wrong. And so, for example, one of the things, I had an interesting experience about 10 years ago where I was having dinner with this Chinese guy, and he was a grad student at Berkeley. He'd actually gone to college in China. I think he was pretty party connected. And we started talking about trade, and specifically about, I mentioned Friedrich List. And he was like, "Oh, Friedrich List." Because this is not an economist, this school is even less taught than Austrian economics in modern. It's basically, at least Austrian economics is another kind of liberal economics. This is illiberal economics. And so, basically, I had thought that the Asian world was just simply, they just reinvented these principles spontaneously. Oh no, they've been reading Friedrich List. And so essentially, when you basically look, the tree should be known by its fruit. And when you basically look at the attempts of applying liberal economics to trans-Pacific trade, and you see objectively that you're seeing the destruction of the productive capacity of the United States, and basically a concentration of ownership of this capacity in China. Worrying about that doesn't make sense from the Adam Smith perspective. From the Adam Smith perspective, consumers are getting the cheap plastic crap, so why does it matter where it comes from? It should be the cheapest. However, if you basically add the term of like a nation is something, a national interest is something, if you add basically the nation as firm into this, then suddenly like the Einsteinian term starts to dominate, and Adam Smith becomes really extremely wrong. So, for example, I think that one of the things that's cost the Libertarian Party something is that it doesn't really have the language to articulate what globalization has done to most of the United States. Whereas if you basically drive around the middle of the United States, you see these like ruins that are the result of some government policy in the last 25 years. If you basically have a system of political and economic ideology that says we need more of that, rather than what the hell happened, can we think about this logically, it seems ipso facto a destructive mistake. What ideology caused this destructive mistake? Again, we have, I think, a more sort of powerful intellectual basis for attacking sort of the current regime. And I think a lot of the aesthetic of libertarianism just sort of comes from this just like viscerally correct disgust with the way Washington works, and sort of this like desire to kind of, replace it with nothing in a way. And that keeps running up against the reality that nature abhors a vacuum. And like, it's sort of without a strategy for sort of filling this vacuum by replacing one form of power with another, it's sort of like the theory just isn't kind of general or realistic enough. And it often leads to sort of weird reverse direction things where it's sort of looking at a problem like the destruction of the heartland due to globalization and basically being like, you need to do this longer and harder for some reason.
Let me interject here, because that's a very